to Dudes Talking episode 55, part 2 of the Mandela Effect, with the Epic Journeyman. Epic, are you there?
I am here.
Good. I'm glad people have been looking forward for this episode for us uh, to discuss the intricacies of the Mandela Effect. So, to finish up what we talked about last stream that I had you on to cover the Mandela Effect Part 1, um, we were discussing the Sinbad Genie movie, which some people have termed Shazam, and its connections to Noel C. Bloom and Family Home Entertainment, and that it being a limited release only for rent in um, like Blockbuster videos or like mom and pop rental places, and that your theory was because there's something incriminating on that film or that was not supposed to be released, that they were bought back, and that is why there's no existing copies of the movie today. Am I correct? And
Basically, yeah,
yeah,
that's the gist of the theory because I ordered it when I ordered it. Sinbad was just getting popular. I mean, he had his HBO specials and things like that. People knew who he was, but he hadn't been a star or leading man in a movie yet. And so when I saw this movie, kind of in the middle of the flyer, not really promoted. It's being promoted with a 2-for-1, not 2-for-1, but a 2-pack with other movies you could choose from to have sent with it. And or that cheap. It was like I said, $14.99 before. It was like $17.99 or two movies for $34, and after tax came 38 or whatever. But it just said Sinbad, and it's like, really, is Sinbad the comedian? Like, yeah, it says it is. So I ordered it, and I was jazzed at the time because I thought it's going to be cool. Sinbad's emerging in his popularity. It's going to be a good renter. I'm buying it on the cheap, and. After about 10 minutes, I mean, the first 10 minutes was really good, but I realized why. It was awful. It was awful in the middle. It was never finished edited, in my opinion. It was never finished in post-production, just raw footage in the middle, really cheesy and corny, kind of like a Nickelodeon movie. So, what we found, we were discussing last interview, was that I started following these connections because chasing originally Roger Corman down, it was down to Richard Corman's New Concord Family Entertainment and FHE, Family Home Entertainment, because they both had rainbow logos, and I knew it had a rainbow logo on the box for the production company. And Roger Corman ended up being a dead end. I found some interesting things with Corman along the way, like the Fantastic Four movie that he tried to bury, basically filmed and was never meant to be seen. People knew about it because it was a comic book base. You're never going to hide anything from people who saw that at a comic book convention, but the print disappeared. So it gave me the incentive to keep following the other direction, and I was shocked and amazed to find out just all the depths and seedy underbelly of Hollywood that Noel Bloom was involved in, and the fact that he became a ghost. All his records on the internet basically were erased. I mean, all you have is one paragraph we talked about now about him. But here he's this guy who's a major player in the pornography industry. He's the guy who started Caballero Home Entertainment. He's the guy who started all those film reels. He had ties to the mafia, and this is where we didn't get a chance to elaborate, and so we're going to elaborate some here. Along the way, I found out he was involved with a crime family called I think it's pronounced Bonanno crime family. And this is the thing that when we brought out his association with Jose Jimenez, or not Jimenez, I'm sorry, Jose Menendez, famous for the Menendez brother killings, the slayings in 1989, and his association and claimed association as accusations of him being a pedophile by Menudo, members of the boy band Menudo, things involved with Michael Jackson, not Michael Jackson himself, but other people who were associated with him at that time frame. And then this, of course, during the trial, the children accused him of being a pedophile. And I'm not saying that he was, but it's interesting that this is the major thing where they tied together was through Menendez, because it turns out when Eric Menendez was interviewed during, post-murder, after the crime scene when they're interviewing the kids, he fingers Noel C. Bloom. He says Noel C. Bloom and his dad, Jose Jimenez, keep what I call him Menendez had an argument, and they had a big falling out right before the murder, and that Bloom was associated with the Bonanno crime family, and that he's the one who killed his dad. I mean, that's the thing, you know. So the fact that he said that, I don't know, you know, he's always trying to save his own skin, but there's another tie-in that just has this weird tie back to organized crime, and that would explain a lot. I mean, that would explain how a movie that was never supposed to be seen basically in the first place would become recalled. Maybe only had a couple hundred copies out in the field, so to speak. And yeah, that made sense to me. So, I mean, it's just a plausible explanation, because the alternative is, of course, it's the greatest Mandela effect of all time, because it's an entire movie that disappeared. Not we've all seen, but a bunch of us have seen this movie. And those of us who've seen it know we saw it. So either there's a logical reason, which could go something like this crime family intervening and it being recalled, and having the copies are out in the field, so to speak, either recalled or just rented and never brought back or destroyed. I mean, there's only a couple hundred out there, which is likely, you know, then that would be a possible thing to do in the days before the internet like it is today. There was no Google back then, you know. You couldn't look up something on a search engine like that and have access to all this information. There's very little information like that available, what search engines they had, because data was just being put in still in the early days like that. So yeah, it seemed like that was a plausible explanation. So I that's where we left off.
So,
That the alternative, of course, is the greatest Mandela effect of all time.
so epic. To circle back to Noel C. Bloom and some of the research I did, is he was actually in one of the United States Attorney Generals under Reagan. I can't remember exactly which one. One of their reports. It might have been. I don't want to say it's. Anyway, one of them and mentioned that he had connections to pornography and also organized crime, and they mentioned Michael Zaffarino as being who Bloom was doing business with as a major Los Angeles-based distributor of pornography at the time. So I found that to be very interesting. My guess is it probably, I want to say it was probably Edwin Meese III. Was probably the one, because Meese wrote a lot about
Meese was big
pornography.
into the anti-pornography, yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
so I think it was probably him. But yeah, this is very interesting. I'd actually like to do more research as a follow-up on the Menendez about this, dig in later on it. But yeah, it's very interesting. So,
Well, one last tie-in we found while we're on that, before we leave that, I guess, I thought was interesting. The brothers bought the shotguns supposedly at Big Five Sporting Goods in San Diego. And from looking at the picture they showed in the ABC footage, they're showing the cover, I mean, of the storefront. It's either the one on 666 Broadway in El Cajon, or it's the one down in Rosecrans. And if it's the one on Rosecrans, I mean, obviously the 666 address is more salacious and interesting from a viewer perspective, but it's likely probably the one on Rosecrans. And if that's the case, it's directly across the street from all the at that time, 1989, all the porn industry. It was right there in the middle of town with all the strip clubs and everything, and the adult video stores on Rosecrans, because the Navy base, NTC San Diego, was right up the street, and the guys would get out of boot camp, and that's where they'd go. So you had these places, seedy places like the Girls, the Body Shop, is adult video stores. So why would they go to San Diego? It kind of makes you wonder, because that's also, if you had to distribute some kind of underground pornography, that might be the place to go. There's your connection, your hub in San Diego. Just something to consider. Not that has anything to do with the Sinbad movie at all. Just a Menendez link that's
you have
worth looking into.
connections, both to the Genevieve crime family and to Michael Zaffarino, that was part of the Bonino crime family. So there's two crime families that seem to be involved in this. So.
And they're part of the Five. They call it the Five, right? And I thought it was interesting that the guns were bought at Big Five. I mean, it just seems like a message was being sent in a way, because originally they really did think it was a mob hit. It was, everything about it made it like it was a mob hit. And of course the kids later confessed.
Yeah, very much so. So you have, two of the five crime families being involved and a lot of the crime families were involved. A lot of people don't realize that we're involved in the shooting and distribution of pornography from of its early stages in the 70s, in the 80s. Of course, the original Nickelodeons, as mentioned by Josh Reeves' Spellcasters movies, a lot of that was funded by people of Jewish descent back in the 1910s and 1920s. But it's very interesting that a lot of the Italian mob was um, very up with the distribution and production of porn too as well. So that's interesting too. So to circle back to the Mandela effect, where do you want to go now?
Well, I think it's interesting to continue how it developed after. I came there for the Sinbad Genie movie in 2016 to Reddit. That's how I came upon the Mandela Effect, and I've been there ever since. But that was the thing that brought me there. But the thing that kept me there was something called a flip-flop. It's the thing that made me know that it was actually a real thing. I mean, I was interested by some of the word changes and spelling changes and logo changes. That was interesting, but I could always, maybe maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I mean, I felt like it was real, but you can't really tell. So you start researching and thinking in your own mind about what the explanations could be. But then I saw this flip-flop, and it was dealing with the movie Apollo 13. And anybody who's ever seen this happen, it's an experience. It's not a Mandela effect. It's an experience. You actually experience this. And there's been at least hundreds of people who've experienced this, if not thousands. So I have multiple posts over the years of people experiencing this. And what it is, you watch the familiar clip or movie, Apollo 13, but it's at the point where Houston, we have a problem, is spoken by Tom Hanks. And the camera angle goes to his face right there as he's facing into the camera as he tells ground control in Houston the problem. And what had happened prior to that was when you watch it, there's this BuzzFeed article talking about misquoted movies, and it'll say right there that the most misquoted movie is it's not Houston, we have a problem. It's Houston, we've had a problem. And when I came to that particular thread, I was looking, everything I could look at and find said the same thing. It was, you watch the clip, it said Houston, we've had a problem. And the camera angle is different too. It came from overhead, like behind the guys, which they did a lot of scenes like that in the movie because they were filming inside the ship and trying to give space and the sense of them floating around and stuff. But it comes across, I think it's Kevin Bacon. You see him kind of more from the side. And it's Houston, we've had a problem. And we watched this. There's probably 30, 40 people in that thread over the span of a day or two just looking at that while it's still really active. And we're like, yeah, it is. It's Houston, we've had a problem. We're wrong. I mean, we're just wrong. We've been hearing it wrong this whole time. It must be Houston, we've had a problem. And right as we're all accepting the fact that we're wrong, and Reddit was a lot better, I want to say back then in a sense, as far as people being interested lifetime and hanging on to a thread. I mean, it just seemed more lively. But that was at the time for that forum because everybody's kind of discovering the Mandela Effect right there. It was a really exciting time for a lot of people. And this is 2016 for me. And what then happened was we go back, and I go to dinner or something, and I come back and I see a comment, it's changed back. I'm like, no, it didn't change back, whatever. I still have like Windows open in my browser. I go there and I look, and sure enough, it's Houston, we have a problem again. I mean, just the way we all knew it the whole time. The camera angle's right, the the phrase is right. Houston, we have a problem. I go and I search every single thing I can find, every clip I can find. People are saying their tapes have changed at home. Now, I don't know about tapes at home. I didn't have a tape at home. I'm just looking at digital media I can find online, on Vimeo and on different YouTube channels and things like that. And sure enough, they are all Houston, we have a problem. And we've just been looking at these, I mean, extensively, right? And when this changed, they all changed with no evidence that it had ever been the other way. And luckily, you have a clip up of one of the videos one of the guys put up that has some of the comment section that captured that from the same movie clips channel, and where people are talking, do you guys see that change, right? Because that disappeared about a week after this. When I experienced it, it completely vanished. The clip didn't vanish, but the comment section was reset. You see, it's got like 1 million some odd views here. It got reset to 0, and it's got no comments, and it starts right over. Somebody reset the entire comment thread. So that's very suspicious to me, and this is something that of course happened. Now, to my thinking, it's an experience. It's not an effect. It's not a memory. I mean, this just happened. You know what I mean? It happened while I'm there, or in a couple minutes I'm away from the screen, right? So that's what really convinced me that something's afoot here. There is something real going on here.
Let me play this video quick, Epic, and we'll do a commentary.
Okay.
months, do you remember reading about how the famous line from the Apollo 13 movie changed from Houston, we have a problem to Houston, we've had a problem in the past tense? And also the original audio changing to the past tense as well. I actually found out about that back in April. This is a screenshot of my browser history. So on April 14th, I watched Sean Indigo's video where he was strictly talking about the real mission audio changing to the past tense. And it looks like on the 19th is when I looked up the movie and actually watched the movie clip. And I remember when I watched it, sure enough, Tom Hanks said, Houston, we've had a problem. Now my whole life it was always, we have a problem. I watched the movie several times. I liked the movie. Whenever I heard someone talk about the original mission as well, it was always, Houston, we have a problem. Nothing was ever in the past tense. So that kind of blew me away a little bit. Plus, that was the second Tom Hanks line that I heard about being changed, also Forrest Gump. So that was interesting. And I remember telling a few friends and family members about it too, around that time. So yesterday, I happened to be on Reddit, and on the front page, there was a thread called Houston blank blank a problem. And I'm like, oh, I know about that one already. I read about that a couple months ago. But it was on the front page, so I was wondering why it had resurfaced to the front page, so I decided to take a look at it. And the original poster said, the famous line in the actual audio, not the movie, has gone from Houston, we have a problem, to Houston, we've had a problem. And I was like, wait a minute, they both changed to the past tense. What's this guy talking about? And as I scrolled down, I ran into this guy, Brother V. He said, this one is flipped back. Originally, the line from the movie was, we have. Then it changed to, we've had, with others being chided for misremembering it as we have. Now the movie has changed back to its original state. And then I scrolled down further and came across Biersteinstein. And he said, the movie line has actually changed briefly recently, then changed back. You can find top number movie misquotes sites that still have the line as being misquoted as Houston, we have a problem, when the actual quote from the movie is Houston, we've had a problem. But when you watch their own link to the scene, it says the former. So their whole segment on this movie is incorrect now. And it's more than one site, or at least there were the last time I checked, that was a while ago. So he lists a few links here to Listverse, BuzzFeed, and Business Insider, so let's take a look at those. So this is Listverse and the top 15 film misquotes. So 14 is Apollo 13, and the misquote is, Houston, we have a problem. That's the misquote. Let's listen to the clip.
What did you do? Nothing, let's do the text. Whoa. Hey. This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we have a problem.
Okay, so he clearly said, Houston, we have a problem. So that's not the misquote. Even though they're saying the actual quote is, we've had a problem, the actual line is, Houston, we have a problem. Okay, so let's go to BuzzFeed. This is the 20 famous movie lines that you've been saying wrong. Number 1 is Apollo 13, misquote, Houston, we have a problem. We just listened to it, that's the actual line. Go to another one, BusinessInsider.com. Apollo 13, 1995. Popular quote, Houston, we have a problem. Actual quote, Houston, we've had a problem. Nope. This is the real one right here. Here's another one. ThoughtCatalog.com. Number 2, Apollo 13. Quoting it wrong. Houston, we have a problem. Nope, that's the correct quote. So all these misquote sites have it completely wrong. I mean, this is crazy. Let's see. So, to top this off, the old audio of the original mission is still in the past tense. So listen to this. That was clearly past tense. And by the way, the title of this video is incorrect. It says, Houston, we have a problem. And clearly the audio says, we've had. Okay, and to make this even weirder, so I went to Reddit and I typed in Apollo 13, and one thread came up that had to do with the movie. And this is from 5 months ago. So 5 months ago, they were talking about this exact same scenario where the movie line had changed from Houston, we have a problem to Houston, we've had a problem, and then it changed back to Houston, we have a problem. So apparently this has happened more than once. This movie line keeps shifting back and forth. So I'm gonna post links to all these websites in the description. You guys can check them out for yourself. Yeah, this is a crazy one.
All right, Epic. So, what do you think about that?
Well, I experienced it. I saw it happen in lifetime too. I mean, there's no question about it. It's real. I mean, it happened to me. So I can 100% vouch for this. And when they changed back, every single source changed back too. What really tripped me out though, and I wasn't a moderator or anything yet. I'm just a guy. I just started on Reddit, and you'll find that if you look at I got a kick out of looking at the subscribers. There's only 17,000 subscribers on the page. This is a long time ago, right? It's 171 or something now, 1,000. But so we're all looking at this, and we're flabbergasted people in this group. But I find out when I go look quite a bit later, maybe a couple months later, I find out that it's been going on since at least 2015. And there's a video from a guy in England who claims he had it happen on his cassette tape, his VHS tape. And he's making his video, and it's from like a year earlier, like full-on year earlier. Well, in the time that I've been on Reddit since, and I've been checking it pretty much every day since, right? That experience has been shared by at least a couple dozen groups of people. But the thing is, when you go and look at it, like I've already experienced it. So I've already seen it go from we've had and back to we have and the camera angle thing and all that. I've already seen it. So I get excited, or I used to get excited anyway, when I'd see somebody post it because I'm thinking, cool, I'll go back and I'll catch it again, right? And this time I'll have a screenshot. I'm going to catch this myself, and we'll catch it live time. When I go, it's just the way it's always been. It's we have a problem. That's all I see. And everybody else who's ever experienced it before, that's all they see. And in talking to people in the community, and we've discussed and had private messages and groups and stuff, and brought it up on the chat. Nobody's ever seen it go back and forth. It's been Houston we've had, which is wrong, right? And it changes back to what we know is right, Houston we have, and that never happens to anybody again. So even though other people are experiencing it live time, and you catch it like it just got posted, when you go look at it, it's not there. It's just the way it's always been. So you wonder, are these people trolling you? Is this fake? You know? But I can vouch for at least the one I saw, and the fact that there was a video from a year before that described the same thing that I had never seen previously. So I know at least in those two cases it was real. And the people who experienced it, they were just as flabbergasted as I was. So it got me thinking a lot about it, and how that there has to be a logical explanation for that. And there is a logical explanation for that. I mean, we're kind of caught in the past. I mean, I don't want to discredit the Mandela Effect. That's not what I'm here for. I mean, because again, if this is real, flip-flops are the most intense things you're ever going to experience, honestly. I mean, that's because you experience them firsthand. You're not just maybe misremembering something. You experience it as it happens. And that'll change your perspective, which it did for me completely. And so what happens is you think about something like this, and we know now that Stanford University made a program called Face-to-Face back in 2008. And what it enabled you to do was do lifetime editing of broadcast in live time. And that could be broadcast on television. It could be something being watched on a stream. It could be anything, and change the actual facial expressions, the words, everything. Live time. I mean, using artificial intelligence back in 2008. And it's got better and better since. And if this sounds familiar to people who are listening to me describe it, that's because that is exactly the technology that the lesser quality, in my opinion, deep fakes are based on now. The stuff you can like go public domain basically, and just get the software and let your computer crunch some stuff and make that happen. These computer programs that Stanford made do it in live time. So now we know that there's a major university, SRI, involved in this, and they have the method to do it. But that's not good enough. Okay, why would they do it? Well, they're a psychology in the group. They have their psychology group on campus. Maybe they would want to do it that way, some kind of test. I mean, that's possible. Or maybe something like DARPA would be interested. That's possible too. But then I found out there's actually commercial, and we got it up there on the screen, a commercial company called Myriad. It's a British company, and they took this technology and starting in 2011, started retroactively editing movies and television shows. to where they'll change the backgrounds, they'll change the cars. I mean, literally the car, like let's say they're driving a Maserati, they'll change it to a Volvo or something, whatever they want to advertise at that time. And it's seamless. You would never know the difference. You'd think that's the way it is. Not only that, but things on the bookshelf, television shows playing in the background. Like if you're watching a show from, let's say, 2015, and they want to show a current ad from 2017 for a beer commercial or something, they'll put that on the screen in the background or on the bus stop on the poster, they're at the bus stop or all just, things you're not supposed to notice, but they do it. And they've been doing it for almost 9 years now. I mean, professionally. And it's uncanny how good it is too. So here it is people are actually paying this company to do that for them. So now you look at the fact that it's something in the real world that's being used commercially. It doesn't even have to be on the level of a research group at a university or a DARPA grant. It's being used for profit. It's a private venture. I mean, these are people doing it for profit. So we're dealing in a world now where the ability to hijack an IP address and put something on your screen separate to what everybody else is seeing is not only a possibility, it's likely being done. So as much as I would hate to people get mad, the Mandela Effect community, by me trying to explain something like this and making an excuse, let me say that does not solve many other Mandela effects. It does not solve how things change in your own house. It doesn't change how verses in the Bible change. It doesn't change how, nothing like that. This explains it all. But this particular aspect of it, things changing digitally in digital form on your screen, yes, it does explain that. And you have to at least consider that. And so that was the first thing that I really saw that gave me some kind of comfort, so to speak, that this might be explainable. It's still not cool. You know what I mean? It's not cool people are doing that to you. Well, I didn't authorize them to do that. At least I didn't think I did. Until I watched a documentary called Terms and Conditions May Apply, which I kind of knew already, but they're talking about end-user license agreements and how we all agree to things we never even dreamed of, all the time in small print. So it's as simple as that, potentially.
So,
but the next one I saw, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'm going to play the video, the little ad that they have real quick. But I just want to tell two things that happened to me, and I wonder if it happened to you, Epic, or anything that happened in the chat. Okay? So there's two instances that I know that I read news articles that were later reported again as news again. Okay? Like they had not been reported beforehand. Like it's brand new news. So much so that when I went to search to find if it had been reported previously beforehand, I couldn't find anything alluding to it at all. Alright? Now one is kind of benign. Alright? It was this burrito place in Portland. It was called Kook's Burritos. It showed up on Drudge Report during December 2016, because I remember it was Christmas season. I was sitting in my recliner in my living room, reading this article put up that these owners of this Portland burrito place, Epic, these two women had went down to Mexico and they stealed this homemade burrito recipe from like watching like a woman in her house a Mexican woman in her house through the window like make tortillas. They all blamed them over cultural appropriation and they were attacking their business or whatever. And I remember like seeing it months later when it showed up. I think it was sometime in May of 2017, and I was like, wait a minute, I've already read this, and going back and looking at, because I almost felt like I was, being, I don't want to say gaslit is the right word, but I don't know, like I felt maybe I'm losing my mind or something, so I went back and looked, right, and I couldn't find it. And so that was one time that it happened. Now another time that it happened around the same time was, people might remember the so-called I guess she was actually leaker of classified material to The Intercept, a Reality Winner. She had such a weird name as Reality Winner. And that's a name that sticks out, right? It isn't like John Roberts. So it's kind of like a weird name. So I remember that that the news came out about her leak. I want to say it was around. I remember seeing it was like early 2017. It was like in January or February. I remember 4chan and 8chan were talking a lot about it because it just had been after Donald Trump was elected, and they were looking into start about the allegations of Russia spying. And then I remember, everybody making a big deal about her name and everything. And then around the same time, this is almost like along with the Cook's burrito thing, where all of a sudden it just popped up in the news again and people were talking about it again. I want to say it was like in June. Like it was a brand new thing. Like no one had ever talked about it previously beforehand. So again, I was like, what's going on here? Like, am I losing my mind? And look, I understand it sounds crazy. It sounds crazy to me. I still don't want it to believe it to be true. But I've talked to other people who have had similar circumstances of them, in everybody's mind's like a goldfish for the most part, so they could easily be reporting on stuff twice, right? So I just don't know. Like I hate to say that those things are real because I have no idea, and it could just be me. I don't know. It's just subjective. I have no proof.
Use the term.
But
use the term being gaslit, and that's exactly what it's like. That's exactly what it's like. No, a lot of us in the so-called community and outside that are paying attention to this, that happens a lot. That happens a lot. Not just the ones you just mentioned there. That happens quite a bit. Where something shows up in the news, you've read it, it was a month and a half ago, it's 2 months ago, whatever, it comes up again like it's brand new, and you go look to see the old article, and the old article's not there. And that is exactly what this is like. It's exactly like being gaslit. And I think it's a good time to look at this clip because we can kind of tie this in and get into more exotic theories too. So we'll show you how something can happen, and then the more exotic theories about why it may be happening.
Because I'm glad I'm not the only one, because there's been one or two friends of mine that really look at the news and really read Drudge Report on a daily basis, and they've done separate things that they have noticed that are separate to mine. So I don't know if they're just reporting the same news or what. I don't know. Maybe it's just all in my head. I don't know. I don't think it is, but it's just something that I've noticed. So let's play this clip. So their AI analyzes footage for insertion opportunities and then identifies locales, key moments, and determines the relevance for brand verticals. The newly created inventory is turned into campaigns that put brands, videos, products, and signage into the emotional context of the content. So right there you see that they put a now ad that wasn't previously there in the footage that was shot to discuss about cars. The platform easily scales campaigns across episodes, shows, and networks on linear and digital. So they imported in there. Now, DK Wilson said in the chat there was a gap in the reality winter reporting. She was first accosted at her home and then some reporting. Then around the time her case was to begin, the news again wrapped up again. Yeah, DK Wilson, but again, was that 6 months or was it only a few months? Because I remember the story about reality winter being reported on 4chan and 8chan. It was almost the beginning of the year. It was slightly after the new year, if I remember. There might have been that much of a difference in the reporting. It could just easily be that. But, go back to your point, Epic. Using this myriad technology, they can digitally insert things, and analyze footage to add in anything. They claim here ads, but it could be really used for anything.
It could be anything, right? I mean, all Running Man with the combat scene in Running Man, totally. They could just put any props they want in there. They map the whole environment and can put anything. And one of the earlier ads they had, it might be, I'm sure it's on the website still, is they have a girl leaning up against a car. The car is like I want to say it's like a Volvo. And then they scan it, and it's a totally different color, whatever it is, but it ends up being a silver, I think, Mercedes. I think it's a Mercedes convertible. I haven't seen it in a while. But, I mean, it's a totally different car. It's right there. And the reason that's important is because the other flip-flop that I personally witnessed, and I can, again, vouch for, is the Back to the Future van. And that blew a lot of people away. And that's happened twice that I know of. I only saw it the one time. But the time I saw it, I mean, I can definitely vouch for it. So what it is we all know that in Back to the Future, it's a VW van that the terrorists are in when Marty and Doc Brown are at the Twin Pines Mall in the parking lot, and the terrorists show up, and they pop the hatch and, start yelling something in Libyan Arabic and chase after him, and he takes off in the car, right? Well, that VW van no longer was a VW van. What it was a kind of a beige or light colored Toyota van with a top, a slide top. I don't know what the model of it is. I've seen it, but I can't recall the model. But that's what it was. And same thing. We're all watching it. We're like, well, that's weird. I mean, I guess that's what it is, right? We all thought it's a VW van, but it's the exact same thing. We're all to the point of agreement almost. Like we've all convinced ourselves, communicating back and forth in the thread over a matter of a couple hours or a day or two, probably a day and a half or something. And same thing happened. It goes back to VW. And again, this is something you experience. It's not something you were misremembering. You were just looking at it. Right? So this myriad, this exactly is that. It's exactly what it does. So, and it's been around since 2011. So there is potentially a logical explanation for this. It's not a good one. It means somebody's hijacking your IP. I didn't think I gave them credit or authorization to do that, but it's possible. It's possible. But now we get into the exotic, because the exotic is what I was known for when I first got there, and still am I always have the wild theories still to this day. And but when this stuff was happening, people started turning to CERN. They didn't know about these companies yet. They didn't know about Face-to-Face with Stanford. They didn't know about Myriad. But we knew that they were doing these. The Large Hadron Collider was doing these experiments, famously for CERN in Switzerland, outside of Switzerland there, so on the border of France. So the reason people thought that way, now I need to point out, at that time on the Mandela Effect subreddit, I wasn't a moderator yet, and I got banned like 3-4 times for even bringing this stuff up, because they banned people from mentioning the Large Hadron Collider, because so many people were mentioning it that it got to be a nuisance to the people, the team at the time. And I can understand why, totally. But everybody was saying it without really explaining why it was, you know what I mean? And so we came up with code words, like I use Voldemort. I prefer to CERN to be Voldemort, and things like that, so we can still get our point across on the forum. And that's what led, rightfully so, me being banned back then. So, but the first theory that I came up with was basically the idea that you need a huge amount of energy to manipulate reality. And it's kind of like the idea, if you've seen the movie Forbidden Planet, there's this race called the Krill. They're long extinct. And the reason it's a forbidden planet, turns out, is because there's this device that amplifies people's thoughts. And the scientist who's there, has been using it, the same device the Krill used in the movie. And there's this underground, this huge underground base. Underground has all these generators and stuff to produce the power. And that's the idea, that he's producing this monster from the id that manifests itself in reality. And that's the sci-fi premise of the story. So the energy being generated from CERN and potentially crossing dimensions and manipulating parallel realms, parallel realities, to allow these little pinprick holes to bleed across from one parallel dimension to another, seemed plausible. And combined with the D-Wave computer at the time, which is, Geordie Rose was famously hyping it as gathering resources from other dimensions, kind of to hype it, but that's what he said in his talks. And that was the kind of the sci-fi angle a lot of people started to take. So that was the first thing. And what we've started to think is that's one of the more exotic theories. And I don't know if you want to go more into that realm, or kind of start where I started, eventually became a moderator a year later. And then I kind of gave up on making those wild posts and actually moderating the forum. had to take on the trolls and, kind of hung up my my post shoes for a little while for the most part, the more exotic things. And, it'd be fair and balanced, basically, and treat both sides, skeptics and believers, experiencers alike. And you start to see a lot of theories come up, and they come down into different categories. But I will say that one of the ones that just gets rolled over and not talked about the most might be the most important one. It's the idea of hypnosis. It's the idea of mesmerism. What Franz Mesmer back in 1770 or so coined the term animal magnetism. It just became hypnosis, right? And that is an interesting topic, actually, because there are mass hallucinations and there are instances of mass hypnosis. So the question becomes, can that be done remotely? Can you be hypnotized over your monitor? Is that possible? Right? So I think that was interesting a foray into a realm not a lot of people talked about, because when you look at hypnotism now, nobody really explains it yet. I mean, they either believe in it or they don't, but scientifically, it's not really explained. It's an idea of a power of suggestion, and basically it's a placebo effect, or it's something really happening. And Franz Mesmer, I'm surprised they didn't make a movie about this guy. He was trained by Jesuits. He was a friend of Mozart. He was in King Louis XVI's realm there when he moved to France, to Paris. And he made this machine to do 20 people at a time, to cure them using mesmerism, right? And they'd dance around wildly in this ballroom and stuff and be cured, supposedly. Well, it's just kind of like the guys today with chickens, clucking like a chicken, or playing rock guitar riffs, air guitar and stuff never played before, singing like Taylor Swift or something, right? Knowing all the lyrics of songs supposedly don't know. Is that real? Is that real in a carnival, or are they all faking it? Well, I don't know, because people claim to have gone there and been hypnotized themselves, or to have the tape of their friend who really was just a guy in the audience. So it's one of those things that you'd think in the 21st century would have explained, but it's not. And it's really significant because it ties into so many things that we consider paranormal phenomena today. And we're going to start talking about the possibility of weaponized paranormal activity when we're talking about the Mandela Effect. I mean, so it's a combination of science and the paranormal combined, what I like to call technomages. The combination of magic and science. And that's absolutely possible, because we're talking about something you don't know how it works, hypnosis. Yet it's used for regressive hypnosis therapy to recover old memories of whether it be alien abductions or childhood abuse or whatever else you might be, or to help you quit smoking. But you can't explain scientifically how it works. I mean, it's still an open debate in the 21st century, really? And those guys at the carnival really do that stuff? I mean, it doesn't add up, does it? I mean, it's one of those things that when you think about it, you do get a sense of cognitive dissonance, because how is that possible today, that still is an issue, right?
Well, I mean, they do have an idea that when you're in a state of hypnosis, if I remember correctly, your brain switches from theta waves, which are kind of like dreaming, that normally would express that, to I think delta waves, when you're very, very, very deep within hypnosis, which is like, when you're very deep sleep, the higher amount of delta waves are being shown, because I think it's alpha's when you're at rest, beta, if I remember, is when you're engaged and focused. So the brain is pretty much at a state of very just
suggestive.
Yes, at that point. So,
yeah, go to alpha state.
But they don't quite understand how hypnosis specifically puts the brain from an alpha wave pattern to a delta wave pattern, then to a gamma wave pattern. So it's very interesting that that's what happens. And now, so we kind of got an idea of the mechanics, but not necessarily how you get from point A to point B.
Right. Speaking of point A to point B, can you bring up that pyramid picture on
yes,
the channel? Or yeah, let's do that, and we kind of step through them a little bit. So this is after years of investigation and surveys. They did all kinds of surveys of the subscribers, and kind of came with this template to explore and step through the whole thing. We did a 6-week series of posts and all kinds of answers, just people answering the question. and I call it the Mandela Pyramid. But at the time, it was a series post called "Crossing the Rainbow Bridge with the Mandela Effect." It was all just questions, and people answered their own way, and that's what it was. So I don't see it on the screen, but I can bring it up on mine.
I brought it up now. It's up now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me move back here. I'm gonna have to get my other controller here in a second. Whoops. Did I drop you on YouTube? Uh-oh.
No.
Yeah, there it is. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it started with the series started with religion and belief systems because I wanted to find out if people with different religious belief systems, whether they be atheist or Abrahamic or Muslim or whatever, if that made a difference to the way that they experienced the effect. And it turned out that they didn't. After all the data came in, basically all the people answered their questions. It doesn't make a difference what religion you are at all. It seems to play no role whatsoever.
Now, it might play a role in how you look at it or the reason.
Yes. How you interpret it. Yes, how you interpret it, but not the actual experience itself. That's right.
Yes.
And what I did find, though, is there is one thing that sticks out on that, and that's the fact that two things, actually. Let me back up because I kind of lost my place when talking about it. It's funny. But one thing that stood up was languages. It wasn't religion and belief systems. It was languages. And it's logographic languages. Logographic-based languages like Chinese, Korean, Japanese have very few effects in that language. Very few. And that was the one thing that stood out. Like that was the only thing that stood out was that every other language that based, whatever it might be, it could be which is an Arabic-based or Germanic-based language, anything like that. Those had it a lot, but even things that are Japanese, let's say like Pokemon, they didn't have the effect in the Japanese so much. It was in the American version, basically, reading the English version. So things that are actually all in logographic-based languages are highly impervious, it seems. They're not totally impervious. There's some, but it's a Mandela effect. I had some guy from China get with me a couple months back describing stuff from Hong Kong. But yeah, very rare, very rare. Other than that, though, it doesn't seem to matter what part of the world you're in. It's worldwide. So then we talk about psychology, hypnosis, and the paranormal. And this is where we're just talking about hypnosis, and psychology and the paranormal come into play here because this is something that, tracing back, we're just talking about on the technology angle with Stanford University, they were the first university to start a parapsychology division. I believe it was 1912. You can check me on that. It might be 1912 or 1920. Later it went to SRI rather in the 70s, but they were the first actual university that had a program like that. And the psychology ties in because it turns out that Franz Mesmer, he actually is considered the father of psychiatry because he actually started what we call psychiatry today. Essentially, it wasn't called psychiatry then, but that's what they trace it back to. So that's that link to him again. So in the paranormal, we research paranormal activity and we find that what does it have? Why does it occur? And what does it have to do with belief? It ties back to belief because you believe you saw that UFO, you believe you saw that ghost, but did you really? I mean, if nobody else saw it and only you saw it, you believe it, but you have no proof, right? Very much like the Mandela Effect. If nobody else experienced it with you, luckily we have a lot of people who did, but you don't have proof. That's a frustrating thing about the effect. It doesn't seem to leave proof, right? Just the memory of the event. So that's very much like a paranormal experience. And so it got me thinking about this tie-in to the scholastic world, or that's not the right term, but the educational realm, and how a university research kind of environment, they would maybe perhaps experiment with these things. And it turns out that they did, right? They did. In a big way, they started doing it, especially in the 60s. It really started ramping it up in the 60s. And they had a guy named Andrea Behark, I think that's his name. He's Serbian. I'm going to pronounce his name wrong. But he was a PhD, and he came back to Stanford. He's the guy who introduced the world to people like Uri Geller and started Project Stargate, all these other things, remote viewing. He was to the 70s to what's his name, the guy the Area 51 guy is today. I'll think of his name in a minute here, but yeah, so he just was on every TV show and involved, but going back to like the 50s, these seances and things like that. And the seances is where it gets interesting because they did the seance in Maine. People might know of, they explored this thing called the Nine. They contacted the Nine. And what really made that stand out, see if I have some notes here real quick online, so I don't have to go look for them. I'm going to have to go look for them, looks like. But yeah, the people involved, it was obviously Baharik started it. And then, oops, I'm in VR, so forgive me for browsing around here.
Anybody in the chat?
Oh, Andrea Baharik, yeah, he's an interesting cat. Well, we'll get into that in a minute. I don't seem to have the tab open. I want to misquote the guys' names that were involved, but it's interesting because it was Anne Bancroft was the mistress of Alan Dulles, right? And Alan Dulles obviously was tied into Stanford in the Project Midnight Climax and the MK Ultra experiments that came from there with Timothy Leary and other people. And she was his mistress, but she was the owner of the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones at the time. So these were all powerful, very wealthy people at this seance, this famous seance. And the other two people, that's why I want to find the names. I should just look up. If you look up the 9 seance, maybe you'll find it before I do. Because I'm doing it VR, I can't really find it. But the reason it's relevant is because this ties back to this actual study done at the university level where they were doing this. And it ties also into, later on, in 1962, the Stanford AI Lab, Artificial Intelligence Lab, because they were taking the work of Norbert Wiener and trying to make artificial intelligence. That's where it first started. And the very interesting thing about that work, and what led to that work, was that they were using kids who had disabilities, autistic kids and things originally, and deaf children and things
All right,
like that.
I got the list. You ready? The list of the 9. I pulled up.
Yeah, pull it up. Read those people's names off.
Recluse's excellent blog. I have to give Recluse credit. Shout out to Recluse. The 9, as they say. So you have Henry and Georgia Jackson, Alice Bouvier, Marcella DuPont, Carl Betts, Vonnie Beck, Arthur and Ruth Young, and Andrija Purik.
Baharik. That's
Baharik.
the guy. Yeah. That's the guy. Right. That's the link
Never
to all
had me
this.
pronounce
is him.
any names ever. But
It's Undria, right? Undria. And I think it's Baharit, like Baharit, like a T almost. He's Serbian. I tried to look it up. It's too much. Yeah, I'm not exactly the best pronunciator of foreign languages. But yeah, so you're talking about the couple. That's the most interesting one. If the wife, you can reference the wife right there.
And Alice Bouvier apparently was originally Ava Alice Muriel Astor.
Yes,
so
her
she was
dad
a
died on the
descendant of
Titanic.
John Jacob Astor.
Yes. Yeah, and well, what these people did. Okay, so they were really. What I want to get to. I found. Here it is. I found my link too. So okay, so Arthur Young, Mary Bancroft, Marcella DuPont from the DuPont family, Alice Bouvier, Arthur Young, and his wife. So Arthur's wife, Ruth Young. It's really interesting because her and Mary Bancroft became best friends. They ended up touring the world together, like later on as old ladies, basically. It's like, that they just hung out together. But so this wealthy group of people, they started this, and I wish I could remember the name, but they started this group from that kind of carried on the tradition. And Gene Roddenberry was one of those. And it all goes back to the Bay Area. This whole thing goes back to the Bay Area, goes back to Stanford, goes back to this study in parapsychology, right? And so you start finding out that the people that were brought in at that time frame were brought in there because of their skills to try to prove the existence potentially of this energy, what this animal magnetism injury that Mesmer brought up. This is a legitimate exploration into that, and the idea of the power of suggestion. So we don't know if this particular seance really happened or it's an urban legend. I mean, a real legend, but it was formed with intention, rather, to make people believe this, to bring something else about, just like that focused power of intention in the movie Forbidden Planet, right? That same kind of idea to manifest something in reality. So the exotic theory here is that the real things are more interesting than exotic right now. Arthur Young did the helicopter for Bell Helicopter, but his wife was friends with Oswald's wife, and Oswald was living at her house in Irving, Texas, when Oswald supposedly shot Kennedy. They watched the whole thing on TV. She was in the living room with them. Now, what are the odds of that happening is my question, first and foremost. That is not really possible, right? It's not possible to be coincidence. It's not at all. So, and the fact that Mary Bancroft was Alan Dulis's mistress, and the fact that she turns out she was like the super spy, actually. There's all kinds of stuff about her. She was actually doing a lot of intelligence work also. So the point I'm trying to make here, it's a labored point, I'm sorry, is that what this shows is that there was an effort to truly use the paranormal and the power of suggestion and focused intention to manipulate reality. And so the exotic theory goes that they found the code, if you will, of the holographic universe, and the idea to use something like a powerful source like CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, right, and the breaking apart of the fabric of space-time, ideally, to focus intention. So what this device becomes is what we would consider as Christians, perhaps, a prayer amplifier. It becomes an amplifier of what's being the energy put into it, the concentrated focus into it. Now, that's just an exotic theory. I said I was going to get to the exotic theories, and that's the exotic theory. And one of the many,
So I want to say, Epic, real quick. DK Wilson in the chat said Mary Bancroft was a spy. She dealt a bunch with Aleister Crowley, and if I'm not mistaken, was a good friend of one Barbara Bush when she was Barbara Pierce.
The Pierce family.
As well as Recluse said in his blog, even by the mid-1970s, the Nine had become big business. They had several wealthy backers, such as members of the Bronfman clan, Canada's richest family, and Italian nobleman Baron Di Pauli. They would also gain celebrity backers, such as Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek. Roddenberry would go on to incorporate references into Star Trek via The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. But yeah, the Bronfmans, of course, the Bronfmans being tied in with both the Council for National Policy and the Nexium cult, with Claire Bronfman, is very interesting. Very interesting. So.
Well, it gets better. So the going back to the Stanford connection, there's a huge amount of that stuff, leaving the Mandela effect out of it. But this idea of the taking, we're talking about how Artificial Intelligence Lab in '62 is taking these, they're looking for Rain Man, essentially. They're trying to stretch the boundaries of the artificial intelligence by giving it data that was unusual with human behavior to map human psychology, the human mind. They're trying to map the human mind because Norbert Wiener's cybernetics book in 1948 suggested that feedback loops could do this. And the Macy's meetings in New York over a 9-year period were all about this, basically. And so this is a continuation of these ideas that you could use a massive network, a neural network based on feedback loops to mimic the human mind. And this is the basis of transhumanism, the idea that you can translate your consciousness into basically a computer mainframe and then transfer your consciousness that way into another body of your own choosing that can carry it. So this idea of eternal life. And when we're talking, so this ties back to this nine because, and the intelligence connections there are undeniable, obviously, with that, because it shows that the American aristocracy, or just the wealthy, in the sense, they were really into spiritualism in that time frame. They were super into it. And they had the money and the finances and the resources to basically be in a separate group apart from the government, apart from private business that we think of it today. They were just a group among themselves, kind of working on the down low. You had to be a member of that club. And Andrea Baharak is the guy who links them all together. But the interesting cat or character, she's not a cat. Norbert Wiener's the youngest person to ever get a PhD. But prior to him, the youngest person to enter the PhD program, and she was at Stanford, was a girl we know as Betty Ford. I'm reading her book right now. Not Betty Ford, the president's wife. That's her nickname is Betty Ford. It's actually, I think her first name's Maria Betty Ford, and I'm waiting for the last name, Aquino. And the book I'm reading is Pegasus to Pin Feathers. It's her collection of poems that her son, you're going to love the name here, you'll recognize, Michael Aquino, compiled from her writings from her time at Stanford under the tutelage and the mentorship of Lewis and Frederick Terman. The foreword's written by Lewis Terman, and there's a bunch of newspaper articles about her being the Wunder kid, basically coming to Stanford at 14. So she goes to Paris, and this is at the time when they had opened up that parapsychology section at Stanford. So, and Lewis Terman is the one who started that made that happen. So this is War Eagles talk about the Manhattan Project. This is the Manhattan Project of parapsychology, of the idea of making things manifesting reality through the power of our minds and focused intention. So it's an undeniable fact that there's no question that this stuff was going on to see if you can manipulate reality in some documentable way. And there never was supposedly any conclusive evidence that you could. Now, it's interesting that quantum physics started to prove that things really can be in two places at one time. It can be both, here and not at the same time. The whole interference pattern, observer effect, and Schrodinger's cat dilemma. And that's what's being tapped into. So if you manipulate that, perhaps you can manipulate something targeted in a small way. Instead of trying to change something big, like the color of the White House that everybody's going to see, maybe you can target something that through entanglement is a group of people that you've already identified and targeted. You can change it to them. And you can do it through something as like the Luce patents through your monitor, right? Henry Luce. Who, by the way, isn't a real person. I don't think he's, I'm sure that's a fake name, but he has all these patents about mind control through your electronic devices going back through the 70s. And yeah, that's not a real name, I'm sure. But here we go. Here's an Aquino connection, and we all know who Michael Aquino is, but going back to Stanford, going back to this parapsychology unit. So we're looking at that second tier, the psychology, hypnosis, and the paranormal. That's that. And that leads us to the parallel dimensions we're talking about: simulation theory, holographic universe, time travel, and the multiverse. I would say that time travel personally doesn't seem feasible, not to cause the Mandela effect, just because it would happen to everybody, I would think. So I think you could scratch that one off.
Yes, I think you can scratch that one off too, I agree.
And the holographic universe we're tying into how you can manipulate, if you could intercept the source wave, if you go like reality itself is a wave function that existed in wave form prior to becoming physical reality, if you could interfere with that and replace that, that's high end, obviously, theoretical physics and super conjecture, but that would be something you could maybe do.
Now, some
simulation
Christians
theory
do believe when it comes to the Mandela effect that the source wave that comes from God, and Brad from Carolina played one guy who was pretty much discussing this. And I don't necessarily agree with it. I'm just saying that some people have said that Satan corrupts that, data
he
in a
replaces
way,
it.
and
Right.
the fall corrupts it. So that's why you end up having Mandela effects, is because of that, supposedly. So.
Yeah, and I wrote a long article about that, the holographic universe one, and that's my favorite pet theory. Like if I'm going to go exotic, that's my favorite pet one. But really, Philip K. Dick brought about simulation theory. It gets credited to Nick Bostrom, and Nick Bostrom is definitely the scholar who made it, proposed it as a genuine theory. And he's a scholar. He's a PhD in philosophy and a number of other things. But he put this forward first as an actual scientific theory. And that's the idea that as time goes on, our computer power gets better and better, that we're not the only ones in the universe, of course, doing this. And that somewhere along the line, as Moore's law just keeps running away, right? And all these other things, what will happen is it'll become so great, the computational power becomes so great that you can simulate reality completely, a whole universe basically in a simulation. And that's his theory. There's three things in the theory, but that's the one everybody clings to is that. And that explains a lot too. I mean, if you're running a simulation, then the architect or the designer or the programmer can change anything they want to at any given time. So that would explain partially that. So a lot of people adhere to that. And the parallel dimensions, the idea behind that one kind of gets into quantum immortality. And the two things in the surveys that I've done that the Mandela Effect experiencers seem to have more than anybody else. I mean, the only two things that seem to be the standout.
One quick, I want to say, it was called the digital physics argument for the existence of God, is what it's called. So if, you could explain the Mandela Effect in that if the universe emanates from a divine mind, which would be God, then Satan and the fall of man can interfere with that emanation, and in doing so can lead to Mandela type effects. Now, I'm not saying I believe that, but there are some Christians who say that say that is possible. So.
And I wrote a post about that, and I updated it with some extra information. And that's the one people should look at. It's called "Seeing is Believing: but what if what we see isn't real? Seeing is believing. What if what we see isn't real? It's a long post, but it describes exactly how you could. It's like two projectors running side by side, and one takes the place. They're in sync, right? And one takes over for the other one. So it seems seamless to you, but you've actually now seen an altered scene. And that's, if you're talking about from a religious standpoint, Satan taking the source wave of God away and replacing it with his own. That's what that is. That's exactly describing that. I'm describing it more in a scientifically plausible way. I mean, exotic and not armchair, not super.
And that theory
science,
comes from the Christian apologetic Michael Jones, who's got a YouTube channel, Inspiring Philosophy. So let's continue. So let's go to technology next, which is above all that.
Well, let's just go real quick on parallel dimensions, because the things that what I was about to say was the two things that the Mandela Effect experiencers seem to experience more than other people is either a near-death experience, right? That's the main one, a near-death experience. Well, we'll stick with the near-death experience, actually, because that ties into quantum immortality. And the idea behind quantum immortality is that there are parallel dimensions in the multiverse that exist all the time around us. And that when you die in one of them, it may be something you survived an event on your side, but in that reality, that dimension, you did die. You step into the next adjacent closest one. So you're now in a dimension that's every bit is almost exactly the same as the one you left, the closest one to the one you left, except for tiny little details where somebody went left instead of right one day or something, just tiny little details, right? And that's the idea behind parallel dimensions. Yeah, so technology we're talking about a little bit with the legitimate ones, with the Myriad and with face-to-face and the idea of deep fakes. And now it gets into things that are very real, that are happening around us right now, and it's really artificial intelligence at the head of this. And the group of people who are working on it the most, that have the most resources right now, is the big three big five really, that dropped out of Stanford. 4 of them dropped out of Stanford, 1 of them graduated. And that's Peter Thiel with Palantir, Brian Johnson with Kernel, and Elon Musk with, of course, OpenAI and all the things he's doing, but mainly Neuralink. Neuralink is the one that's the big one for brain-machine interfaces. And, of course, Sergey Brin and Larry Page at Google. All those people, 4 of those quit the PhD program at Stanford to start their own companies. They're all in the same area in the Bay Area. They're all working together. And, in fact, Brian Johnson, Elon Musk, and what's his name, all worked with PayPal, Peter Thiel. They were all at PayPal together. Peter Thiel and Elon Musk started it, and then Brian Johnson had a company of his own and was bought out, and that became part of PayPal. And they left and started these other companies. So those 3 are tightly together. They're linked.
Are they
at the
considered
hip,
the PayPal mafia, if I remember correctly?
Yes. Exactly.
Which I will say for a future video to tease you guys. Do you know who is supposedly all of their mentor?
For them, I do not. I have to expect it was Frederick Terman or William Shockley.
It is a man named Rod D. Martin.
I've heard that name, but
majority of them, really, like when you hear Peter Thiel talk about Rod D. Martin, he gushes. And so Rod D. Martin is, let me bring him up, is a long-term 20-plus year Council for National Policy member. And his website, of course, when you go to it, has him as Rod D. Martin, and it has him as futurist something or another. This is the guy that was behind, supposedly, the PayPal mafia. Entrepreneur, futurist, philosopher, capitalist, Rod D. Martin.
Yeah, it's amazing, actually, the people involved here. And what I'm trying to show through this, and it's probably not coherent yet, but it may never be, but it's that the idea that this wasn't something that just sprung out of nothing in 2016.
Yes.
It goes back a long way. They just didn't have the technology to realize what they were trying to achieve. They weren't able to do it. But now they can. I mean, when you look at, if you just combine Palantir, Kernel, and Neuralink by themselves, just those 3, right? You're talking, this is brain-machine interfaces of the future that are going to tie us directly, to what they call mirror world. This digitally enhanced world. The cloud will be in the cloud. I mean, our reality will be a digital reality. It'll be indistinguishable from regular reality, except for these enhancements that come on and off. And people they'll become so accustomed to it that they'll be blind without it. They'll cry for it back, and that's what these guys are up to. I mean, that's really what they're doing. I mean, they make no bones about it. That's what they're trying to do, right? And then, of course, you have Sergey Brin and Larry Page over there at Google, who also have enormous resources and the power to do this. And the data scraping, the amount of data points they're gathering on every individual is just amazing and astonishing. But all you have to do is think about the idea that every single inch of reality is being mapped. And this is where I think it gets to an explanation possibly about why we haven't had a Mandela effect since 2009. There seems to be a deadline that after that point, there's no new, I mean, there's people discover effects, but it's not something that came into existence. So anything that came into existence after 2008 doesn't have an effect related to it. And what's changed since then is the digital world where everything's being observed. So the idea of the observer, whether it be a human or a machine, collapsing the wave function and wave particle duality, that basically came to an end in 2008. That's the theory, right? Is that so now nothing, so for example, the movie Avatar will never have a Mandela effect about it because it's only existed in digital form its entire time. It's always been under constant observation. It will never change. So this mapping of everything comes from your TV sets, your phones right now, the Google card for Street View driving down your neighborhood, the satellites, everything else. There's going to come a time through the Internet of Things where every single piece of the material world will be under observation constantly. There will be no escape from a digital overlay. The analog reality will be mimicked 100%. And so that is the goal of these people, is to have that kind of control over reality. Now you don't need the spiritual parapsychology side of it. You can do it through science. The idea of being techno-mages.
That's a real thing. I just don't know if they'll ever get that. I don't think that God would allow them to supersede free will completely, Epic.
I don't think so either. Not we won't have that happen to us unless we let it. We accept it. Like if we accept that. I mean, that just gets us the next one, the top one, apotheosis and ascension. That's where the idea that we're changing as human beings. And so the idea behind this whole pyramid here and how it relates to the Mandela effect is that the Mandela effect is not a thing of its own. It's a symptom of something else. It's always been a symptom of something else. It's a symptom of this ladder being climbed to achieve these things. And as these things become achieved, right, then the effects emerge because that's a little fragment of our analog reality that's being stubborn. It's not we're not letting go of, basically. Some of us aren't anyway. And sometimes just a test. I mean, a lot of it might just be a test to see exactly that. Like, what is something that a tiny detail that we're so stubborn that our brain won't let it go? Because you can't put that into the simulation. If you put that into the simulation, then the simulation won't be convincing or real. It'll knock you out of the simulation, right? You'll realize it's not real. So it's those identifiers. What do people have in their conscious mind or unconscious, really, or subconscious mind, that's so it anchors them to this analog reality. So in a way, that's what's happening. I think those things sometimes are targeted. They're being found that way. That's the exotic. But the apotheosis and ascension, a lot of people believe that this is just a sign of whether it be the age of Aquarius or us moving into the end times or all these other explanations that we're changing as human beings, where the separation between those of us who still are in a spiritual analog world are leaving the world that is becoming behind. And we're becoming a different kind of human, like a higher, what they call it, a higher frequency resonance, all those new age terms, right? But a lot of people believe that. So that's why it's on here. You have to throw that in there.
How they're trying to get us to evolve. That's what the world order is working through theosophy, is pronounce it. I would say ascension, pretty much.
Apotheosis.
Apotheosis. Yeah. There you go. God, tongue tie.
Man becoming God. Yeah.
Yeah. The deaf and dumb spirit was attacking me at that point. But yeah, I couldn't get the words out.
Happened to be this show.
But it's very interesting that when you look at the movie Under the Silver Lake. Did you finally? Yeah, you did finally watch that episode.
Yeah, I did.
What did you think about it?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting for sure, and it was idea. I mean, there's some things that are catches there for people. I don't want to necessarily spoil it for people, but yeah, the people who thought they were the cultists basically
If
If
you
that
if you don't
part
want
was
if you
real.
want to watch the movie, skip 5 minutes.
Skip,
All right,
yeah,
skip 5 minutes.
Skip this.
This is your warning.
Yeah,
Skip 5 minutes if you don't want
yeah.
spoilers
Skip 5 minutes. Yeah.
for
So
Silver Lake. Go ahead.
Under Silver Lake. So the movie starts off. The guy doesn't have a job. He's having all these weird experiences, and the dead bird falls from the sky. Right. But he's walking into his little Melrose Place style unit apartment. You know, the little courtyard, and the thing is, it just gets weirder from there on. There's always little clues that he's actually on some kind of, if you pay attention, he's on some kind of trip, some kind of drug trip. So there's a lot of clues to that. And he does end up taking a bunch of these drugs later on at this party. And he meets this girl at the party, and that girl ends up being this demon, basically, that kills this like conspiracy theory guy that he just talked to, like, was it a day or two before? I think it all happens over a span of a day, right? It starts like one day, goes in the next day, basically, I think. But he ends up finding this secret underground. It's not really. It is underground, and he goes out there. It goes in this boarded off area out in kind of the sticks in the Hollywood Hills, like under the Hollywood sign, basically, somewhere. I think right out there somewhere. Not specifically, but he ends up going down there, and there's these people that are waiting on the ascension. They're going to be translated into. They're going underground, and they're going to live out their lives eternally there. And this whole thing uncovered is about this cult, basically. And
Yeah,
in a way, it
ascension
does
cults.
tie into this. Yeah, it's an ascension cult. Exactly right. And so that's what, like, on the positive side, the benign side, we're talking about maybe Christians and believers of Buddhists or spiritual people, just spiritual Muslims, spiritual people in general, even people who don't believe in religion, perhaps, just focusing on what's real, what God gave us, and heading up to a higher dimension, essentially. And we're leaving this earth behind. That's the idea of ascension. Apotheosis is what transhumanists seek and what Freemasons seek and other secret societies seek, and that's man becoming God. And if you go to Washington, D.C., you'll find that in the Capitol, you'll have the apotheosis of George Washington painted on the mural at the top of the dome there, where he becomes a god. I mean, they actually make George Washington, if you would look at this image in this painting, he's becoming God, right? A god. And he was a famous Freemason. So, I mean, we're not going to pick on the Masons. I'm just saying this is a mystery school religion kind of thing, which is why we kind of have this pyramid here. Because at its core, that's what this is. Right? It is something of a religion to the people involved in this, I think. And these little clues we're seeing, maybe they are something related to this bigger grand plan. Or, people want to say it's just all easily explainable. It could be. I mean, maybe not all of it. We could talk about the Bible verses changing and things like that, but there's no way some of these things change in your house. It's just not possible. You have to be changed yourself, something about you is being changed, or it's really changing. One of the two. It can't be any in between. You're not just forgetting your favorite Bible verse. You know what I mean? You're not forgetting your favorite photo. You're not. That's not happening. Or if you're witnessing these other things we're talking about earlier, some of those can be explained by technology. But is that technology being done to deceive you, in a sense, to reinforce that belief that you can manifest reality, or that reality can be changed, that reality isn't stable? Maybe it's more about the idea that reality isn't stable and that reality can be changed. And by you losing your anchor ability, it enables, through the power of technology behind it and focused intent, to make it easier to happen. That's
I
the most
believe that
exact.
reality can't be changed. I believe that it's just one's perception of reality that can be changed. There is one universal objective truth, which is God. But I'm not saying that, for example, things cannot be manipulated by Satan, by technology, to deviate or intercept that objective truth. It still doesn't completely, stop it from those who find God. But it still is a way for Satan as the adversary to interfere. And if the Mandela Effect is real, that's what I think that it is epic. Among people misremembering in some degrees, or technology, being changing things. But I do think that would be Satan in that regard, the Python spirit, the false Holy Spirit, in a lot of ways. So yeah, I mean, it's I definitely think that would be true in that case. So that's how I look at it. If
So there's no real answers?
There is no.
Yeah,
We'll never get down to the bottom of it. We could speculate on Speculation Island for years.
Right.
You know,
And so I wanted to point out, like, after 4 years of tending to that, and going through all kinds of, events there, really interesting, some of the things that have happened on that Reddit forum, but over the years. But we've looked at all these things, and after looking at all these things, I mean, there's still things that, okay, people they are misremembering. It happens. People do conflate things. People do have confabulation. But there's other things that we've talked about. Those aren't. Those are definitely technologically manipulated, or there's something else at play. So let's go with if you can eliminate those through technological manipulation, and we can talk about the biggest Mandela Effect, in my opinion, of them all, the Sinbad genie movie, a whole movie disappearing from existence. Well, it's either being hidden by something like the mob. I mean, it's a solution, right? If you take those two things away, what are you really left with? You're left with a lot of other things. I mean, you're left with your Bibles changing. You're left with products changing, things like that. But the mystery becomes more focused on that now, because you can eliminate those two other things, right?
So I guess one thing, changing real quick, and one for the show, and I'd like to have you back on for part 3 if you don't mind, Epic. Is the famous verse of people remembering the lion shall lay down with the lamb. Now, I remember that growing up in a Presbyterian church, that being said quite frequently, and that being everywhere. Like you would see banners posted with it, but that has changed, has it not?
Well, the vast majority of illustrations, paintings, and images still have the lion and the lamb together. They still have that. There's a couple I found out that have the wolf, because it's changed to the wolf, right? And I remember there being more than one verse.
If I remember, it's Isaiah 11:6, right?
Yeah, there's another one too that has it. I can't find that one. I remember I used to have to quote Bible verses. I went to a Christian school last part of high school, so
we'll stick with this one for tonight, because this one's the most prevalent one that people remember. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's no question that it wouldn't be. I mean, there's Lion and the Lamb ministries. There's Lion and the Lamb daycare centers, Sunday schools. I mean, just look at it. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of them, and many ministers who's made it their whole point to study the Bible all their life and went to school and all that stuff. They quote the lion should lay down with the lamb, but it's wrong. How could they all be wrong, right? I mean, it just seems so unlikely. It's a good one. It really is. There's a lot of Bible verses that have changed, but that one's the most significant one, the one most people know.
It's very much so. I mean, you have Israel being represented as a Lion of Judah, so it would just make sense culturally. Not to say that you couldn't have wolves in the Middle East, but they're generally, I think, outside of the Arabian wolf, if I remember, they're generally not found a lot within the Arabian Peninsula. They're more found in your wooded forest areas, more northern, like in Europe. So it would just make sense for it to be the lion would lay down, or the lion would live with the lamb. So it's just very
well, especially considering how many of these prophetic books of the Bible were written in Babylon. Babylon had lions on its gate, right? There's Daniel in the lion's den, right? The Asiatic lion was prevalent. Samson, didn't he kill a lion? I think it was the thing of him killing a lion somewhere in there, if I recall right. And I mean, it's all over. And of course, your enemy, the devil, is like a lion seeking whom he may devour. There's only verse I know that has wolf in it is a wolf in sheep's clothing. That's like the only one I know of. So many more verses dealing with lions, because Asiatic lions were very, very common in the region, particularly in the Babylon region.
And of course, the wolves in sheep's clothing would be in Matthew, which would have more of a Roman, which would make sense in that regard.
Well, because the Romans, for people who don't know,
even though Matthew was, written Jewish influence, obviously, but it would make sense of why. I'd have to go back and search, but I don't think there's.
The Roman logo, the Roman origin story is the she-wolf, right, with the children suckling the breasts of the wolf. That's so there's pictures and not plaques, but images that throughout Rome. That's so that when they say wolf in sheep's clothing, in a way, it's talking about Romans, right? That's what they're saying, because they were had an adversarial relationship during New Testament times with Rome.
Yes, I definitely think that's that's something that I find quite odd. That it was changed to the wolf will live with the lamb, or the wolf will lay down with the lamb, where I've always remembered it to be lion. So, Epic, is there anything else that you want to say in closing, brother? Definitely thank you for coming on this evening. It was excellent conversation with you, brother.
Well, I was all over the place, and I apologize to people in the Mandela Effect community there that I wasn't able to focus well. But it's a big subject, and trying to condense it all into an hour or so is really hard to do, because it's an incredibly deep subject, a lot deeper than people realize. Just any one of these little headers here on the pyramid, if you just focus on any one of those, yeah, you have hours of content just there by itself. So it's hard to focus on which one to really pay attention to. But I think we covered some of the better ones.
Yes, very much so. Well, thank you for coming on, Epic. We'll have a part 3 eventually in the future. But definitely thank you for coming on. I greatly appreciate your research into the Mandela Effect.
Well, enjoy being here. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good evening, Epic. Bye. All right, that's it. I want to thank Epic for coming on. It was a great chat. I still don't know where I stand. I could see different... I can see the technology angle in a lot of ways, and manipulation through technology. I could see misremembrance on some things, mass hypnosis on another. So yeah, I want to definitely great to have Epic on here. It was a great conversation. Epic's esteemed researcher. So thank you. Hope everybody's doing well. Tomorrow, Greg McCarran from The Antidote will be joining us to have a discussion about Lee Stranahan. So look out forward to that. Next Sunday, Frida Captives and I are going to start a new show called Spirit and Truth from a Christian perspective every Sunday. So be on the lookout for that. Lee, of course, my co-host Lee Veltman's in the chat. Go listen to Jimmy Jean, who was our first guest, talk about Synanon-esque landmark forums in the game. An excellent show. If you missed it, go back and listen. A lot of hard truths, a lot of personal stories were being told during that shining light, and the mind control associated with that too as well. So that's it, everybody. There's Finders FBI files drop 3. So